So, welcome back to episode 9, where we're talking all things hills today, all things running hills, about the reason why we're going to run hills, a reason, there's many reasons to run hills, why you should be including them in your monthly sort of running schedule, and, the benefits of doing them, and some typical sessions, covering sessions that you can plan and make yourself, and also just discuss a little bit about the session we did today with our running club that I had planned and programmed. So I just, we'll dive straight into it and just talk about the benefits of running hills. So running hills is a massive substitute to your running program, something that you can add in, which is normally a really all-out session, something you might do in your weekly routine instead of doing a sort of typical track session. You could potentially add this into your sort of weekly routine instead of your track session, or if you're an experienced runner, you might add it in as a sort of once a month additional into your running with your track. So running hills is obviously really good for your muscular endurance and your strength. So I know I've spoken before on previous episodes about your strength for endurance and different exercises that you can do to get stronger. One of the main things you can do is more running, which if you're doing running, especially on the hills, is really good for your muscular endurance and something that I would definitely look to add in. So I would say for frequency, you're probably looking at once a month as a minimum, especially here in Dubai. We're in the off season, and unlike Europe, where people are, typically picking up the mileage for the summer, looking towards that full marathon. Here, the mileage is generally quite low, probably similar to what we look at in a Scottish winter, where you're just trying to keep ticking along, keep the base going, but also work on weaknesses across the summer. Just due to heat, you're not able to get the sort of long sessions in that you typically need for endurance sessions. So if you can work on things that you're otherwise a bit weaker on, so something that people are always weak on is hills, and one of the best ways to get better at them is to run them. This is really good for people who are doing sort of long distance endurance events, especially if you're going to do ultra marathons. You may not be able to sort of go out and do the typical hill trails that you see some lucky people who are able to sort of live in mountainous regions are able to do. So if you live somewhere like here, where we've got a maximum elevation of probably about 50 meters and minimum of zero, the biggest hill you're going to get is probably likely an overpass. So you're able to sort of do what you can with what you've got. So that's what we've got. We've got a 200-meter overpass over a motorway, and what we do is we train on the side of it. And this is about 200 meters, about 6-7% gradient, and it means that we're able to do hill repeats on this over and over again. And you could do the same. You can do it wherever you live. I'm sure you can find somewhere that's a gradient. I know a lot of people in North America, especially in the flatter areas, they use their motorway pedestrian overpasses to train, and you're able to just adjust the session in order to make a sort of big benefit. Hill sessions, obviously, like I said, really work on that muscular endurance development, but in your which ultimately leads to your 3 pillars of endurance. So your VO2 max, you can definitely work that whilst you're doing your hill session. So anywhere around that sort of VO2 max pace, when you've got your heart rate up towards the top, that's a great place to be working. And obviously you can raise your ceiling, so your VO2 max will effectively be your top ceiling of what work you're able to do. So when you're working in them sort of high zones, that means that you'll be able to sort of lift up your overall fitness. You'll also be able to, depending on the hill session you do, you can also work things like your threshold, which is your second pillar of your running endurance. So if you're able to lift up your threshold by doing repeats on the hills, sort of working maybe a step below, all out effort. So a session for this might look something like you could do 4 by 6 minutes at a pace up and down the same hill, maintaining the same pace up and down, which means you're getting the sort of development as you go downhill, which is something that's people don't really do a lot. But when you're working uphill, you're sort of working around that tempo threshold, which would be like similar to your half marathon pace, which is really it's a really tough session. Eventually, you will sort of get to the point where you feel you're sort of tipping over that threshold, and that's the point that I'd normally call the session. When you find like you're sort of starting to creep into that really high heart rate, high VO2 max stuff, that's normally where I'd call that session. And obviously, if you're doing like a VO2 max type session, then that's maybe something you would maybe look at shorter duration intervals, but for bigger effort. So around an RP 9 out of 10 for around 45 seconds to 90 seconds for that. That kind of development, which obviously will lead on to your third endurance pillar, which is your running economy. So with your running economy, when you get stronger running uphill, you will get your running economy increased. So if you're able to increase that, then that will make you run at faster paces for a lot less effort. So that's why I really rate hills, because it really touches on every sort of aspect of running that you can sort of you can do. You would use this as a sort of all out session or like one of your top sessions, like I said. So if you need to replace it with another hard session, that's fine. Around once a month is always a good idea. We sort of mixed a couple of different sessions today where we did something that I came up with. So it was like a partner's repeat workout. So one partner runs a 100-meter hard effort, 9 out of 10, up to the top of the hill, around 6 to 7% gradient, and then back down, whilst your partner does a tempo effort, which they are the person who is the clock. So they did a 500-meter out and back at your tempo pace, so around a sort of 7, 8 out of 10. Nothing major, but then going from that tempo, you obviously would switch. So the tempo person would go into the hills and do the repeats, and then the people from the hills would go into the tempo. And then once you switch again for the second time, you obviously are switching the two different stimulus between what you're working, and I think that's really good, and it definitely mimics something like a longer half marathon, especially one that may have lots of elevation in it, because you may need to put in that sort of lifted effort on the uphills and then go back into your sort of sustained effort on your sort of tempo pace around half marathon pace. So the guys really enjoyed it, and I always say that hills is like one of the best sort of endorphin workouts, especially if you can get together with a group. Like we had sort of 50, 60 people down there this morning in 40-degree heat doing the same hill repeats, and at the end of it, the sort of feelings were really good. People had put sort of a big effort in, and we had repeated the same effort from 2 weeks ago. So people were able to manage their paces a bit better. They knew what was coming. They knew how they felt, and people were feeling stronger as a result. So, I think that's always good. You can get the same sort of workout. I think running workouts can often be overcomplicated. So you're basically able to get that simple workout that we did today, and then you can repeat it. You repeat it every 2 weeks, every month. You can feel how you get stronger. You can feel if you can get better. You can feel what you did right. You can feel what you did wrong. And I think keeping that simplicity in your running plan is something that will always help. So you can just go back and look at it. And I always suggest, like, once you finish your workout, especially if you've got something like Strava, where you can go onto your Strava or your Training Peaks if you're coached, and write down as much stuff about that session as you possibly can. So, felt strong until the 5th rep, where I felt like I went too fast. The 5th rep was this pace. I felt like this. Always go back to what you feel like as a sort of reference point, as opposed to paces all the time. And then, next time, before you go and do the same session, you can read off, okay, I felt good until then, and then reflect before and after each session. And that way you're able to get the most out of each session that you do. And I think that's really important. You can train like an amateur, but if you're like professional with it and, you're putting a lot of time and effort, you're probably putting 5, 6, 7 hours a week maybe into your running. And you think, well, why don't I just sort of go that next step and start treating my body and treating the training a bit like a professional? Like, a little training diary. If you're somebody who likes getting the pen and paper out, you can take it down and write it in there. But you really got no excuse with most of the times you're probably writing down stuff on the apps, and you probably spend 5-10 minutes on Instagram after. If you just spend 30 seconds writing down how you felt, you might get a lot more out of the session. So that's something that I would say. Another sort of hill session that we will do is, we'll normally do this around once every 2 months, will be 10 to 16 reps, depending on your sort of level, of 45 seconds all out. So that will be like an all out effort, as in around a 9 out of 10, or between sort of 1 and 3k pace, again depending on your fitness levels and where you sort of come in. And this is like an absolute max session. Sort of, I always say that track sessions and hill sessions, you should be able to walk away with still something left. Always think 1 rep in reserve, and this is one that you really have to manage that effort, because if you go over the precipice and you're really struggling, you may do yourself some damage, cause yourself some injury. So just always think about that 1 rep in reserve and manage your effort throughout. So if you're sort of training for your next marathon, ultra marathon, maybe consider adding hills in. I know that some of the famous marathoners, Paula Radcliffe, she was doing hill sessions, according, if you can believe, the internet training blogs, but she was doing around 1 hill session a week during her prime. That might be a bit much for sort of beginner runners, especially because she was doing upwards of 100 miles a week at altitude. So this is a good way to get a good workout in. And I sort of ask you to go out and think about your running next time you go out, what your running is like whilst you're doing running on hills. I imagine that like most people, you'll struggle to run with bad running technique going up and down the hill. It's sort of a leveler. It just puts you onto a place where you can run with good technique throughout. So it really, there's nothing wrong with heel striking, absolutely not. But this is something that really gets you to sort of work on your form, make sure your chest is over your body. You're not leaning too far forward. You're not leaning too far back, and you're not overstriding. You're keeping your hips, your feet under your hips, and I think that's will improve your running economy. So definitely give this sort of a couple of these sessions a go. And obviously, if you've got a really good hill workout that you think, right, well, I think it would be worthwhile for people to know this, then obviously let me know below. And I hope you enjoyed listening to that. So give the hill sessions a try, and then we'll see you next time.